Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Greg Kohlberg here, and today I'm going to go over the agents, one host setup for Blade Logic. So this is an RSCD agents one host setup in Blade Logic. And before I get started, I just want to make sure we kind of lay some requirements here. Is that if you have Windows, then you are out of luck. This does not work in Windows environments. But if you have a Unix or Linux app server, file server, then this is going to work for you. This setup will work in Unix and Linux. The reason being is that on Windows, it's just not possible to install two RSCD agents at this time. I mean, maybe in the future they'll allow that, but at the current 8.2 version, it's not possible. So we'll talk about first the reasons why we would want to install two agents on one host. And to do that, I will kind of draw the architecture here after I put a little box around my title here. It's kind of a crappy box, but all right. So why do we do this in the first place? And let's talk about the infrastructure. So we have here the app server, and this is its own kind of logical thing in the Blade Logic architecture, or architecture or infrastructure. And then we have the file server, which is its own kind of logical architecture. I'm going to make this box a little bit bigger because I'm going to draw some more stuff in here. And the only time this comes into play is when you have the app server and a file server on one machine. So that's when you would want to have two agents on one host. It's when you want to manage the app server as like, a server in DSA, and that app server also has the file server on it. And let's call this, app1. Okay, app1. So this server is app1, and it has an app server installed on it, and it also has a file server. And one of the requirements of a file server is to have an agent installed. So it must have an agent. The app server over here does not need to have an agent installed. So this is not a requirement to have a functioning application server in Blade Logic. So, for a standard infrastructure app file server, only the file server needs an agent. But you would have an agent if you want to manage app1 here as like a managed server, right? So managed server, which is very common. If you're using Blade Logic, you want to have all the servers in your environment kind of under the control here, but this is kind of one of these funky cases where you're kind of managing Blade Logic using itself. So, the kind of way to do that effectively, to treat this as a managed server, but to also treat it as the kind of app server, file server combo here, then we'll need to have two agents on the one host to have it, be secure and also function as a file server should function. So let's kind of look at why we need to do this. So over here we have a bunch of end users. So here's like one guy. Let's say he's like a Windows admin, and we have another guy, and this is, or girl, this is a Linux admin. We have maybe like a security person, and maybe we have like another compliance person back here, standing back here, and then we have like a manager. They're kind of like logging into Blade Logic occasionally. Point being, we have all these different people with all different roles who are logging into the application server here and using Blade Logic for different purposes. And each of those purposes require varying levels of permission. But what we do know is that no matter who you are, if you're, say, a Windows admin and you're logging into the app server, then you need the same right access to create something on the file server as someone else logging in. So if you're, say, a security guy, you're logging into the app server, you need to be able to write to the file server. And you kind of see my point here. If you're, a Linux admin or whatever, let's use a different color. I use that one. So If you're someone else, you're coming in, you need kind of that same level of access. And let's say that particular place is, you know, we've designated our file server storage to be the storage directory on our file server. And this can be whatever. You can configure this however you want. You can even move it after you've designated this place. There's steps on how to do that in the documentation. But anyway, the point being is if, you know, I'm coming in, no matter who I am, I need the same level of write access to the storage directory as everyone else. Because if I have a different level of access and I create some package on storage and I share that package with someone else and they want to be able to modify it, we can't be running into permission denied errors here because, you know, different people have different write access to the file server. And let me show you kind of how that can happen. So if we're treating a server as, remember, we're treating a server as a managed server in BladeLogic. And what do we know about all managed servers? It's, well, we need to push ACLs. So if we're going to treat a managed server, then we're going to push ACLs. So let's take a look at our configuration files here. So we have exports, and we have users, and we have users.local. Okay, and let's say first we want to define kind of the unanimous access for our file server. You know, because if we're going to have a single agent, then, you know, we can only have one export users and users.local files. So let's kind of talk about, you know, first what it would be like in a world where we just have like a single agent. Oops, so I want to actually do this. And so let's pretend for now we just have like a single agent, and let's try to like erase this here. Okay. And we have our app server, and we just have a single agent. So if we want kind of that unanimous write access, our file server agent would say, only allow, you know, writes to happen from app1, and, you know, give read-write access and map everyone to root. And mapping everyone to root is not really a secure thing. And to kind of address this first issue here, you know, mapping everyone to root, what customers typically do is they'll create this new user on the machine here called something along the lines of like, you know, DLSS. You can call it whatever you want. And anyway, it's just a local user on this machine, and this user has write access to the storage directory. And you just do kind of a chown -r on storage or whatever, whatever you need to do to update the ownership of this directory so that this local user BLFS can map to storage and we're not mapping everyone to root. So then what you do is instead of mapping everyone to root over here, we say, okay, just map everyone to this BLFS user. BLFS. Okay. And now we kind of have this a little bit more secure setup where we're only allowing traffic from from app1, which are the people who are logging to this app server, and we're going to map those people to BLFS. So, you know, all said and good, and we're mapping everyone to this local user. We're not mapping everyone to root. But at the same time, this kind of contradicts with our need to kind of have a managed server here, right? So we want this to be a managed server. And to be a managed server, we need to manage the whole server. We can't just map to BLFS. We're going to need some of these people to map to root. Maybe our, you know, Unix admin guy or Linux admin guy or girl over here, if you remember. So if we're going to have a managed server, we need to push ACLs, right? So we're going to take the ACLs and we're going to push it to our user file, right? So when you create an ACL push job, it does that. Well, what's that going to look like? Well, let's say we have kind of Joe here, and he's a Windows admin. So either maybe he just has read access to the server, or, you know, read-only access, and that's it. And then we have maybe Mary, and she's the actual Unix Linux admin, and so she gets map equals root. And you can see how we now have this, you know, some users have read-only access, some users have read-write access. And if you know about, you know, exports users and users.local, is that these entries here will override the entries that from export. So initially, people coming in, you're getting mapped to DLFS, but because of the users file, they're getting mapped to, you know, these things here. So what's going to happen? Someone's in the console, and let's say Mary's in the console. She creates a new package. It gets written to the file server as with root ownership. And then someone else comes in as a different role, and she shared that package to them, and they are not of the Linux admin's role. They have root access, and they can no longer access it because Joe here, he's getting mapped to user BLFS because there's no override here. And BLFS, only has access to the things that were created when BLFS was, the user creating it. BLFS doesn't have access to things mapped as root. So now in the GUI here, people are getting like, permission denied and all this other stuff. Denied. Well, anyway, you get the point. So that's just a problem. So that's one reason why we don't want to push ACLs to the file server. Another reason being is that the file server, so the app server starts as this user called system. This is a colon if you can't read that. So if you look in the product documentation, it actually talks about putting this entry into users.local, but that's actually kind of a hack. It still doesn't fix the problem of multiple users writing to the file server with various user mapping. So we don't want to have system entries because while yes, it will allow our app server to start, we still run into more long-term issues here. So what we do want to have is BLadmin : star. So or actually it's an asterisk. BLadmin star read write and user equals what? So I guess the question is whether or not the BLadmins are going to be the ones that are managing the server, or if they're going to be the ones that are kind of treated as everyone else. And typically, we would do, I guess, root. Let me think about this. I might come back to that later, but the point being is we can't be pushing ACLs to a server if it's the file server. So I'm going to erase this. Let me use the actual eraser here to be a little bit more fine with my erasing. So we have nothing in the users file. And now this is our entry for our exports users and users.local for our file server. And theoretically, I think, yeah, so this is why I was kind of a little bit confused before. So if this is a file server, we want to just give everyone the same unanimous mapping. Really don't want anything in users.local because we just want to make sure only allow connections from app 1, right? So only allow connections from here, and just map everyone to BLFS, which is going to, so they're going to have access to the storage directory. So on the app server, when people are coming in, they're going through the agent first, right? So it goes through the agent, and then it goes through, this is kind of like this view here. These are the files for the agent. And then that's going to map everyone to BLFS. Everyone's going to be able to read and write from the storage directory here. So again, how do we treat this as a managed server? Well, what we then want to do is put the agent on the app server, right? So it's the same machine, meaning we have to install 3 agents on a single host. So we now have to put the agent here, and then we actually add this to the GUI as a separate server. So we have, we can do this through the host file. We can say this is BLFS, and don't include this in our ACL push job, but this is, DL app, and we want to include this in our ACL push job because the exports file here, export, users, local. These are all going to be treated as a regular, managed server up here. So we're pushing ACLs to it. We have the exports configured appropriately. In users.local, we have our BLadmins, star entry, and so forth. So, this kind of is the solution to that confusion of, well, if it's the file server, we need unanimous access, but if it's a managed server, we need to push ACLs, which, are really just contradictory terms. So this is the overview of why you would want to do this. We have a whole page that talks about how to do this configuring. There's, a lot of kind of detailed steps, but it will, I think the upfront investment will save you a lot more long-term pains of things like, hey, why is my app server not starting? And that, it's because you pushed ACLs to your file server agent. And then the other reason being, why are my users complaining about permissions denied? And that's because you had a system entry in users.local, and while also having ACLs pushed to your file server. So with this type of setup, it's pretty much foolproof once you kind of put it in motion, and then you never have to worry about any of those issues ever again. So I guess that's it. If you have any questions, my name is Greg Koberg. Thanks for your time, and see you later. Bye.